In this video, we're going to take a good look at all the inventory reports available in Brightpearl. The first we're going to look at is the product list, and this is probably the one you're going to use the most often. You can either see all of your products using this menu item, or you can use the quick search at the top right. It shows one line per product, regardless of whether there's any inventory for that item, so it's useful for finding items that have got zero stock. It shows the current stock level in your entire business. So if you wanted to see the specific detail per warehouse, just click any of the stock figures, which opens this window where you can see the breakdown on a per warehouse basis. You can also see how many are on order with supplier, and from here you can drill down to the purchase order. If you wanted to see inventory levels from just one warehouse, simply select that from the filters. You can also see that when you are filtering by warehouse, you also get the location, reorder quantity, and reorder level for this particular product. Now that's the product's default location. It might not be where the current inventory resides if you're on multi-concurrent location management. This screen is the launch pad for a lot of other processes. You can batch update products, and there's a separate video to show you more about that. You can drop into the product itself. Of course, you can do a more detailed inventory query, and here's also where you'd add inventory by stock corrections. You can see a little bit more about what inventory is allocated, and then a bit more information about that product itself. On the right hand side, you can also go to the variant edit, the audit trail, and the sales charts. Just like every screen we're going to look at in this video, you can export it to Excel as well. And when you export the product list, you actually get every column available. You don't need to choose extra columns, so you get options, custom fields, barcodes, and so on. Next up is the inventory detail report, and this shows a single line for every batch of inventory received. So here, for example, we've got two rows for the blue medium kayak helmet. One was received on the 3rd of December and one on the 4th of December. One was a stock correction, which we can see by lack of a purchase order number, and the other one was from a purchase order itself, which we could drill into if we wanted to. It shows the item location, and if you're not using location management, these will all be 0. If you're on standard location management, it'll be the default location for that product. And if you're on multi-concurrent location management, you can have a different location for each batch that you've received. It shows the quantity in stock, number allocated, and the number you've got on hand, the price it was received at, and then the total value. Just like all inventory reports, you can filter by warehouse. And then in this one, you can also search by SKU or name. You can filter by category, product type, and various other things, but note also the way you can filter by aisle, shelf, bay, and bin, which makes this report especially useful for running a stock take in only a part of your warehouse. If you're using multi-concurrent location management, where it's essential to know the location for each line of inventory, then this is where you'd also produce your stock take export from. If you want to reduce inventory levels by making a stock correction, you do it from the inventory details screen. And if you've not yet sold any part of a batch, then you can actually delete the whole batch using the X icon on the right hand side. If any of a batch is allocated or sold, however, you can't delete the whole batch. To reduce the inventory quantity, click the pencil icon over the in-stock quantity. This screen is also where you edit the asset value or the cost price of any inventory you've already received, and there's a separate video that shows you all the detail about that process. Next, we'll look at the inventory summary, and this shows one line per SKU, and this is the current stock levels across the whole business. If you wanted to, you can filter by warehouse. On the right hand side of the screen, we get the total value for that inventory, and the sum of these values generally matches the value of the assets on your balance sheet. If you wanted to see the total value of all of your inventory, what you'd do is you'd export this to Excel and use the figure at the bottom. You can also view this report to a date in the past if you wanted to pull out your stock level, maybe at the end of last month. Just like the other screens we've seen so far, these inventory levels do not include inventory in transit between different warehouses. So if you need to do a stock take including those, make sure you include the inventory in transit screen, which we'll look at next. So the inventory in transit report is available from products, warehouse, inventory in transit. And what this shows is items received into quarantine from a sales credit, or items shipped on an inter-warehouse transfer that have not yet been received into the destination warehouse. So these are moving around in your system and are not yet available to sell. What we need to do is we need to release these items into stock. And there's a separate video that explains how to transfer inventory between warehouses. As soon as items on a transfer note are shipped, they appear in transit. Generally, this is a report that you should have empty most of the time, so as soon as you receive items into quarantine, try and release them as soon as possible, and similarly, as soon as you ship an inter-warehouse transfer, try and release that into the destination warehouse as soon as possible. Next up is the inventory audit trail, which we can get to from the products menu. And what this shows you is all the goods in and goods out transactions for every product. And this does show inventory in transit. What we can see here at the top is that we've received a quantity of 2 of the kayak helmet. Just before that we shipped 25, and just prior to that we received a quantity of 32. You can see the price it was received at, and there'll be a matching accounting entry for this as well. You can see the relevant order reference prefixed with a number, which gives you the order type. So a purchase order is a 2, a sales order is a 1, and then a sales credit is a 3. And here you can see we've received one item on sales credit 100,032. You can also see the date and time at which it was received. To see who made this transaction, search for the relevant accounting entry. You can also see the audit trail for any given SKU. So if we have a look for the kayak helmet on the product search, under the Actions menu you can see we've got View Stock Audit Trail. This shows all the inventory changes for this particular item, giving the current stock level of 9. The lack of an order reference on this first entry indicates that these 32 were added via a stock correction. Next up, we're going to look at one of the most useful inventory reports, which is the low stock report. When you filter this by warehouse and by vendor, you get the ability to simply create a purchase order with one click. So what can we see on screen? We've got the SKU, we've got the name, we've got the options, and then we've got our usual in-stock allocated and on hand, but we've also got open sales, overage, and on purchase order, combined with the minimum stock level and the reorder quantity. So items only appear on this screen if the on-hand quantity is below the minimum stock level. And the quantity that Brightpearl calculates we need to buy is as follows. So if the minimum stock level is 5, and we currently have 0 on hand, then obviously we need to buy 5. But for the second example, where again the minimum stock level is 5, but we already have 5 on purchase order with supplier, we wouldn't need to buy any. However, there's actually one sale here that's not yet been allocated, which is what the open sales figure is. So that's the quantity on orders that's not yet been allocated. So once we've received the 5 on order, and to fulfill the existing sale, would need to buy 1. The third and fourth rows down introduce a new concept of reorder quantity. So even though the minimum stock level is 6 and we've got 0 on hand, we're actually going to have 10 on the purchase order. Because we've set a reorder quantity of 10 for this item, that might be because the supplier gives us a discount, or we decide we want to buy batches of 10 every time we purchase this item. We can edit the numbers here and then click Create Purchase Order. That takes us to a purchase order that would process as normal. There's also a separate video dedicated exclusively to that process, creating purchase orders from the low stock report. Finally, we'll look at a couple of accounting reports. Whilst these are not technically inventory reports, it's important to show you how closely linked the accounting and inventory are. So we're looking here at the balance sheet, which is reached from the reports menu. And here you'll have at least one line which shows the current value of your stock or inventory. And here we can see it's 51,012. That's the sum of everything on the inventory summary, which in my case are 51,000, and inventory in transit, where I've got 12. And the balance sheet is used to show all your assets and liabilities. If I drill down into this figure, it filters the general ledger report to just that account code, where we can see all the transactions that have been made in our accounting system due to changes in inventory. So here we have a couple of manual corrections with the details given by the user, and then some entries created by sales and purchase orders. If you actually wanted to see who made the correction, drop into the transaction, where you can see when it was entered and by whom. So we've covered a lot in this video. We've looked at the product list, which is the one you'll use the most often to quickly find a stock level. There's the inventory detail, which shows a separate line for each batch, which might have a different location or a different price. We've got the inventory summary, which shows one line per SKU regardless of price and batch, and that's useful for calculating the total value of your inventory. You've got the low stock report, which is great for placing purchase orders, the inventory audit trail, which is great for troubleshooting, inventory in transit, used with sales credits, quarantine, and inventory transfers between warehouses, and then finally the balance sheet and associated accounting transactions. Which takes us to the end of the inventory reporting overview.